My wife Claire fired me from our company, then used my credentials to authorize shutdowns that would freeze 43 towns. I found emails proving she'd planned my destruction for months. But when I discovered the legal clause she'd signed without reading, the one that would destroy her the moment she flipped the switch, I had to choose, warn her or let karma do the work. Before I tell you how that single sentence shattered my marriage, do me a small favor, show some love to this story by following along and letting your voice be heard in the comments. You have no idea how much that support matters. My name is Elias Hartman, and I used to be the Chief Operations Officer of Brightwell Energy, the renewable power company that brought electricity to 43 rural communities across 3 states. Claire was the CEO, my wife of 12 years, and the most brilliant person I'd ever met. We'd started this company in our garage with nothing but idealism and a shared dream of proving clean energy could work for people who'd been left behind by the grid. For a decade, we were unstoppable. I handled the infrastructure, the engineering, the relationships with the communities we served. Claire handled vision, fundraising, the board. We were partners in every sense, until the day I realized she'd started seeing me as dead weight. It started small. Board meetings where she'd talk over me. Strategy sessions where my input was politely ignored. Then came the consultants, expensive suits from Boston who used words like optimization and legacy inefficiencies while looking directly at me. Claire hired them without asking, and when I questioned the expense, she smiled in that new way she had, the one that didn't reach her eyes. We're growing, Elias. We need fresh perspectives. What she meant was, your perspective is old. I should have seen it coming. Should have noticed how she'd stopped asking about my day, stopped celebrating the small victories that meant everything to the people we served. When the power came on in Millbrook for the first time in 50 years, I cried. Claire posted about it on LinkedIn and moved on to the next funding round. But I loved her. Loved what we'd built. So when she asked me to sign the restructuring document, I didn't hesitate. It's just administrative, she said, sliding the tablet across our kitchen table. We're streamlining decision-making authority to speed up emergency responses. The board's been pushing for clearer operational protocols. The document was dense, full of legal language about departmental reorganization and authority transfers. I skimmed it, saw my title, saw advisory capacity, saw language about maintaining operational oversight. It looked like a formality, the kind of bureaucratic shuffling that happens when companies scale. This won't change anything between us, right? I asked. She kissed my forehead. Of course not. You built this company, Elias. No piece of paper changes that. I signed it. Uploaded it to the board portal. Went to bed thinking we'd just made Brightwell more efficient. 3 days later, I got the email summoning me to an emergency board meeting. No agenda. No explanation. Just, your attendance is required. 2 p.m. sharp. The boardroom felt different when I walked in. The 12 board members were already seated, folders open, expressions carefully neutral. Claire sat at the head of the table, and she didn't look at me once. Not when I entered. Not when I took my seat. Not when the board chair cleared his throat and began speaking. Elias, thank you for joining us. We'll keep this brief. After careful analysis of operational efficiency and upcoming infrastructure transitions, the board has decided to restructure your role effective immediately. You'll be transitioning from Chief Operations Officer to Senior Advisor, a non-voting position focused on community relations. Your direct reports will now report to Claire, and your access to operational systems will be modified to reflect your new scope. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked at Claire. She was studying her notepad. What? Claire, what is this? The chair continued as if I hadn't spoken. This change is in accordance with the operational restructuring you agreed to on Monday. Your signature authorized the transfer of decision-making authority for all grid management, emergency protocols, and infrastructure planning to the CEO's office. You'll receive a full briefing packet by end of day. I'd signed my own execution order. The document wasn't about efficiency, it was about removal. Claire had engineered this perfectly, made me complicit in my own elimination. The second matter, the chair said, concerns upcoming operational transitions. We're implementing a strategic shutdown and asset reallocation plan for underperforming service areas. Elias, given your transition to advisory status, you won't be involved in these decisions, but we wanted to inform you as a courtesy given your historical relationship with affected communities. Shutdown. They were going to cut power to the towns that needed us most. You can't, I said. Those communities don't have alternatives. It's nearly November. People will freeze. Claire finally spoke, her voice professionally sympathetic. Elias, I understand this is emotional for you. You have deep personal connections to these areas. But we have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors. These service zones operate at a loss. The board has approved a managed transition plan. Managed transition to what? Darkness. To more sustainable regional providers. We've identified potential buyers. Fossil fuel companies. You're selling our infrastructure to coal and gas operators. She didn't deny it. The board members shifted uncomfortably. I stood up. This is insane. We built this company to help these people, not abandon them. We built this company, Claire said quietly, to prove renewable energy works. We've done that. Now we need to ensure the company survives to serve the communities that can actually sustain us. I'm sorry you can't see the bigger picture anymore. The meeting ended. No one met my eyes as I left. The worst part wasn't the job. It was going home to her. We still lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, kept up appearances because divorce meant complications neither of us wanted to deal with during a corporate restructuring. So we pretended. She'd kiss me goodbye in the morning like nothing had happened. Ask about my day over dinner. Fall asleep reading investor reports while I stared at the ceiling wondering who she'd become. The calls started 2 days after the board meeting. Engineers I'd hired, technicians I'd trained, all asking the same question, is it true? Are we really shutting down the Valley Corridor? I didn't know. I had no access to operational plans anymore. But the rumors were spreading faster than I could contain them, and they all traced back to internal memos I'd never seen. Then Marcus called. Marcus Rivera, head of field operations, the best engineer I'd ever worked with. Elias, someone's accessing the emergency shutdown protocols. The system shows authorization requests for 11 substations, all in rural service zones. The requests are coming from external consultants, but they're using admin credentials. Your credentials. My credentials. They were using my system access to plan shutdowns, building a paper trail that would make it look like I'd authorized the decisions I'd been removed to prevent. Marcus, I didn't authorize anything. I don't even have access anymore. The logs say different. Boss, this is bad. If these shutdowns happen and people get hurt, your name is on every authorization. I pulled up my system access that night while Claire slept beside me. She was right, my permissions had been modified. But someone had been very careful. I still had read access to historical data, still showed as an authorized user in the system logs. They'd removed my ability to stop anything while preserving the appearance that I could have. It was elegant. Brutal. Exactly the kind of strategic thinking that had made Claire a brilliant CEO. I started digging through the old contracts, the founding documents, the agreements I'd drafted a decade ago when we were just two idealists trying to change the world. I'd been meticulous back then, paranoid about protecting the communities we served from exactly this kind of corporate betrayal. And there, in Section 7.3b of our Public Utility Operating Agreement, the agreement Claire had re-signed 3 years ago when we went public, I found it. Any operational shutdown affecting residential customers during months November through March requires 90-day advance notice and written approval from affected municipal governments. Violations trigger automatic State Utility Commission review and potential revocation of operating licenses. I read it 17 times. Claire had signed this. Her signature was right there on page 47, dated 3 years ago, notarized and filed with the state. She'd been so focused on the financial terms, the stock structure, the investor protections, that she'd never read the community clauses. The clauses I'd written specifically to prevent what she was about to do. If Brightwell shut down power to those communities without proper notice and approval, we'd lose our license to operate. The entire company would collapse. And Claire was negotiating asset sales with fossil fuel buyers, planning to hand them our infrastructure the moment the shutdowns created enough financial pressure to force board approval. She was going to destroy the company to save it. And she had no idea. I should have confronted her immediately. Should have walked into her office and laid out exactly how badly she was about to screw up. But something stopped me, the memory of how she'd looked at me in that board meeting. Like I was a problem to be managed. An obstacle to progress. So I made a different choice. I started reaching out to people quietly. The engineers who still trusted me. The community leaders in the affected towns. The workers who remembered why we'd started this company in the first place. I wasn't building a rebellion. I was building a network of witnesses. Town councils started asking questions. Why hadn't they received shutdown notices? Why were there rumors of asset sales? Were the new consultants really planning to transfer infrastructure to coal operators? Claire responded by accelerating the timeline. She scheduled an emergency board vote for the following Monday, a full authorization for immediate operational shutdowns and asset sales. She was going to ram it through before anyone could organize opposition. The night before the meeting, she was unusually affectionate. Made dinner, opened wine, asked about my day. It felt like old times, like the Claire I'd married before ambition consumed her. "I know this has been hard," she said, taking my hand across the table. "The restructuring, the changes. But it's necessary, Elias. We're saving the company. By abandoning the people who need us most? By ensuring we survive to help anyone at all. Sometimes leadership means making choices other people don't understand." I almost told her then. Almost explained the legal trap she'd walked into, the licenses she was about to forfeit, the federal investigation that would inevitably follow. But I looked at her face, so certain, so convinced of her own brilliance, and I realized she wouldn't believe me. She'd think I was sabotaging her out of spite. So I just squeezed her hand and said, "I hope you're right." The board meeting started at 2 p.m. I wasn't supposed to attend, I wasn't a voting member anymore, but Claire had invited me as a courtesy. Professional development, she'd called it. A chance to see how real leadership operated. The boardroom was packed. 12 board members, 4 consultants, 2 attorneys, and Claire at the head of the table, radiating confidence. She opened with a presentation. 40 slides of financial analysis proving that the rural service corridors were unsustainable, that strategic shutdowns would save the company $8 million annually, that the asset sales would generate capital for expansion into more profitable markets. It was impressive. Thorough. Completely compelling if you ignored the human cost. Then she said the thing I'd been waiting for. "Before we vote, I want to address concerns some of you may have heard from former employees attempting to undermine this process. Specifically, Elias Hartman has been contacting community leaders and spreading misinformation about these necessary operational changes. While I understand his emotional attachment to legacy projects, his interference borders on sabotage. The operational protocols clearly grant the CEO's office full authority over infrastructure decisions, and Elias himself signed the restructuring agreement authorizing this exact scenario." She was framing me as the villain. The bitter ex-executive trying to destroy what he could no longer control. The board chair looked at me. "Elias, would you like to respond?" I stood up slowly. Pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "I would. Thank you." I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector. Claire's confident expression flickered slightly. "Everything Claire just told you is accurate," I said. "The rural corridors do operate at a loss. The shutdowns would save money. And I did sign the restructuring agreement. But there's something Claire hasn't told you. Something she doesn't know." I pulled up the Public Utility Operating Agreement. Section 7.3b. Highlighted. "This is our license to operate as a public utility in this state. It's the legal foundation of our entire business model. And it contains very specific provisions about operational shutdowns during winter months. Provisions that require 90-day notice and municipal approval before we can cut power to residential customers between November and March." One of the board members leaned forward. "What happens if we violate those provisions?" "Automatic Utility Commission review. Potential license revocation. And given that we're planning to shut down 11 communities simultaneously without any notice at all, we're not talking about a fine. We're talking about losing our legal authority to operate." The room went very quiet. Claire stood up. "Those clauses are from our original nonprofit charter. They were superseded when we went public. They're irrelevant." "Actually," I said calmly, "they were updated and reaffirmed 3 years ago when we restructured. You signed the updated agreement yourself. Page 47. Your signature is right here." I zoomed in on the signature page. Claire's signature, dated and notarized, right below the community protection clauses she'd never bothered to read. Her face went pale. "The asset sales you're planning," I continued, "transfer our infrastructure to private fossil fuel operators. Which triggers additional regulatory scrutiny under federal environmental review processes. Which means even if we somehow survive the state investigation, we'd be facing federal oversight for potentially fraudulent environmental commitments. Our investors were sold on a renewable energy company. You're about to turn us into a coal distributor." One of the attorneys was frantically typing. Another was reviewing documents on her tablet, her expression darkening. The board chair cleared his throat. "Claire, is this accurate?" She was staring at the screen, at her own signature convicting her. The consultant said the regulatory landscape had changed. That we had flexibility for operational optimization. "The consultants don't sign the legal documents," I said quietly. "You do. And you signed an agreement that makes these shutdowns a federal case." The senior attorney spoke up. "Mr. Chair, I need to consult with our regulatory team immediately. If these provisions are enforceable, and they appear to be, we're looking at potential license forfeiture, federal investigation, and shareholder lawsuits for misrepresentation. The asset sale negotiations need to stop immediately." Claire's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. The board chair looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Claire, I think we need to table this vote. Could you step outside while the board discusses next steps?" She looked at me. For the first time in months, she really looked at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. And I saw the moment she understood that I'd let her walk into this. That I'd known exactly what would happen and I'd let her proceed anyway. "You knew," she whispered. "I tried to tell you," I said. "In every way that mattered. But you'd already decided I was obsolete." She walked out of the boardroom like she was sleepwalking. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. When they called me back in, the chair's expression was grim. "Elias, the board has accepted Claire's resignation effective immediately. We're halting all shutdown procedures and asset negotiations pending a full regulatory review. We'd like to offer you the CEO position on an interim basis while we sort this out." I should have felt vindicated. Triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. "I appreciate that," I said. "But no. What this company needs isn't another executive making decisions from a boardroom. It needs to remember why it exists. I'd like to propose an alternative." I laid out the plan I'd been developing for weeks. A restructuring that would convert Brightwell into a cooperative, owned in part by the communities it served. Worker representation on the board. Binding community input on operational decisions. A return to the mission we'd started with, before growth became the only metric that mattered. The board looked skeptical. But they were also facing federal investigation and potential license revocation, so they were willing to listen. It took 6 months to implement. 6 months of negotiations, legal restructuring, community meetings. Claire signed the divorce papers without contest. She'd already accepted a position at a venture capital firm in San Francisco, far away from the wreckage of Brightwell. We never spoke about what happened. No dramatic final confrontation, no tearful apologies. She just left. Took her brilliance and her ambition somewhere they'd be appreciated. The company survived. Barely. We lost some investors, gained others who actually cared about the mission. The communities we served became stakeholders. The workers got voting shares. It wasn't the unicorn growth story Claire had envisioned, but it was stable. Sustainable. Real. I stepped down as interim CEO after the restructuring completed. Took a position as community liaison, the job I should have kept all along. I'm not trying to build an empire anymore. I'm just trying to keep the lights on for people who need them. Last week, I got an email. No subject line. Just a link to an article. Former Brightwell CEO Claire Hartman under investigation for securities fraud at new venture. I don't know who sent it. Maybe someone from the board. Maybe one of the communities she tried to abandon. Maybe karma just has a sense of humor. I deleted it without clicking through. Sometimes at night, I drive through the towns we serve. I watch the lights come on in windows, steady, reliable, powered by the infrastructure we built together. Kids doing homework. Families eating dinner. Old folks watching television. Claire wanted to shut all this down to save $8 million. To prove to investors that we could be ruthless. To show she had what it took to play with the big companies. Instead, she proved something else, that loyalty isn't a weakness. That the people you dismiss as obstacles might be the ones who save you from yourself. I learned something too. I learned that sometimes the right choice isn't the one that saves you, it's the one that lets you sleep at night. I could have exposed Claire immediately, could have humiliated her publicly, could have taken the CEO role and rebuilt my career on her failure. But that would have made me just like her. Willing to sacrifice anything for the win. So I took a different path. I let her make her own choices, and I protected what mattered while she destroyed herself. The cooperative is small. Scrappy. We'll never be the darling of renewable energy investors. But we're here. The lights stay on. The communities we serve have a voice. And every time I see power flow into a house that needs it, I remember why we started this. Not for growth. Not for glory. For the quiet dignity of keeping people warm through winter. Claire never understood that. And it cost her everything. Before I end this, do me one small favor. If this story connected with you in any way, let me know by supporting the channel and sharing where you're watching from. It helps these stories reach people who might need it.